friends, welcome back to the homestead. My name is Constance, and today I am beginning a series that I shared a little bit about in some recent videos, and that is Home Ec with Constance. You know, I homeschooled my kids, and part of them being homeschooled was taking home ec, which I taught for them and some other children as well. And I've had so many people talking about how there is a need for home ec, and they don't really teach that in a lot of schools nowadays. And so I thought, well, you know what? Why don't I do that? And so today is the first lesson. Now, all of the lessons that I'm going to be doing in this series, every Monday a new video, will be geared towards people of all ages. So with these lessons, we are going right back to the very basics. And so if you are a beginner, these will be perfect for you. So the very first lesson that I'm going to do today is all about kitchen utensils. A kitchen utensil is basically a handheld tool that you would use in your kitchen. There's appliances, which are generally machines that you would plug in, or they would use electricity, like a blender or a mixer or a food processor. But today we're talking about the tools. And so I'm going to go through many of the most common tools that you would see in a typical kitchen and just talk about what they are and how they are most frequently used. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is spoons. Now, pretty much everybody knows what a spoon is, and there's all different kinds that you might find in a kitchen. And I have a variety of some here. I've got some wooden spoons of different shapes, as well as some metal ones. But spoons with different shapes can serve different purposes. Of course, they would all be used to stir things together, but you'll notice that these three here are all a little bit different. We have a kind of primitive wooden spoon that is very rounded, like a traditional spoon. You have this one that is more of a paddle shape and it's square on the end. And then you have this one that's a little bit in between. It's round and it's pointed. And the flat edge that you would see here and here are used to scrape the bottom of a pan or a pot to get all of the ingredients off of the sides or the bottom. And so a round one will kind of do that, but you can't really get down into the very edge with a round side like that. And so that's what the flat edges are for. Another kind of spoon is a slotted spoon, and I have a few of those as well. And slotted spoons are also used to stir or mix things together, but they are also used to scoop things out of the liquid or grease. So for instance, if you were cooking hamburger and if you wanted to remove the cooked meat from a pan but leave the grease in the pan, you would scoop the meat up with a slotted spoon, and the meat would come out in the spoon and the grease would fall out back into the pan. And so these are a variety of different slotted spoons. Similar to a spoon is a ladle. A ladle is basically just a big spoon with a larger scoop portion or bowl of the spoon. And this is for scooping out or ladling out things like soup or gravy or sauces. And again, they come in all different sizes and shapes. This one is a short-handled wooden one that's kind of a little bit of a scoop as well as a ladle. And then this one is called a pasta ladle. It has teeth on it to grab the pasta like spaghetti and put it onto your plate or into your bowl. Next we have spatulas, and spatulas can also come in all sorts of shapes or sizes, and there's different ones that serve different purposes. This long and really skinny one is often called a fish spatula because fish, when you're cooking it, can be very, very delicate, and this can slide right up underneath your delicate fish and turn it over without tearing the fish. Then you have a big one like this that is good for flipping things that are large, like a big fried egg or a pancake. I even have a couple special ones like this one. This is a pie one, and it's got a serrated edge. Serrated means it has teeth for cutting through, and that's for cutting through the pie crust or a cake, and for scooping something out that's kind of triangle shape. like a slice of pie or a slice of a round cake. I have a couple bigger ones that are really heavy duty. These are sometimes called lasagna spatulas because they can get up underneath a big heavy slice of lasagna without bending under the weight. And I have a little one here that is used for things like cookies. Next, let's talk about whisks. A whisk is a utensil that is generally made out of some sort of wire. And again, whisks can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. This big, very round one is often called a balloon whisk. Sometimes you'll see them with little wire balls on the inside that kind of bounce around inside the wires. This one is more flat. These two are much smaller with very tiny wires on them. These are usually used for mixing things like salad dressings or sauces. And then this whisk is called a dough whisk. It is a very heavy, strong whisk, and the wires are much thicker. And just like the name says, these are used to mix dough, like bread dough or cookie dough. Something that you want to stir that is really thick. Now, one of the main purposes for whisks is mixing ingredients together, but the reason they have all of these wires on them is because they break up the ingredients or they put air into what you're mixing. For instance, if you are mixing up cake batter and you're mixing it up and you're stirring it with your whisk or whisking it, you're going to get air into the cake batter and it's going to help your cake be nice and fluffy. It will also help break up ingredients. If you've ever tried to mix up eggs with a spoon, you realize that the egg whites don't like to break apart. But when you have all of these wires, the wires kind of cut through the egg white, help break it up, and help it mix into your ingredients a little bit better. Now, similar to a whisk is something like this. This is called a pastry blender, and it is used for cutting butter into things like biscuit dough. It works very similarly to a whisk in that the wires cut through the butter and help break it apart and help mix the butter into the biscuit dough in little bits. These right here are called rubber spatulas or rubber scrapers. And like many other utensils, they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. With a spatula, you can stir things together, but what they are most used for is scraping ingredients in a bowl or a pan and getting it all off of the side. When you're mixing up ingredients like cookie dough, you want to make sure that you get all of the ingredients off of the side of your mixing bowl. Because if your baking soda or baking powder is stuck to the side of the bowl and it doesn't get mixed into the dough, your cookies might not turn out right. And so rubber spatulas are used to get all of the ingredients off of the container they're in and mixed in where they're supposed to be. And speaking of scooping, this of course is called a scoop. I have them in 3 different sizes. This one is considered a muffin scoop because it is the perfect size for scooping muffins or cupcake batter into a muffin pan. And then I have 2 more that are often used for making things like cookies, and it helps you to get all of your cookies the same size. All right, this is a potato masher. It is used for mashing ingredients like making mashed potatoes, but you can also use it when you're making deviled eggs and you need to mix up the egg yolks with other things. And it can kind of work similar to a whisk where it will break up the ingredients and mix them together at the same time. But it's mostly used for mashing ingredients. Next, let's talk about strainers. Strainers are used to strain the liquid from ingredients. For instance, if you have ever made macaroni and cheese, when you get done cooking the macaroni, you have to drain out all of the water, and you would usually do it in one that looks kind of like this. This is called a colander. Colanders are usually bowl-shaped. They can be metal or plastic most often, and the holes that they have in them are rather large to allow a lot of liquid to come out all at once. You may also see strainers that look sort of like this. This one is metal mesh, and it is called a sieve. Now, strainers with small holes like these are usually used to strain out a thinner liquid or smaller items. For example, when I make elderberry syrup, I have a liquid that is filled with all of these little berries, and I want to get just the liquid and leave the berries behind. And so a strainer, a sieve like this, with little bitty holes will help me drain the liquid from ingredients that have little bitty pieces. Sieves like this with little bitty holes are also often used to sift flour. So you don't have to have a special sifter when you need to sift your flour. You can just use one of these. And we'll talk more about sifting when we get into the baking lessons. Kitchen tongs. Kitchen tongs are used for picking up or turning over food in a skillet or a pot. They make it very easy to pick up hot food without dropping it or burning your fingers. Now, every kitchen is going to have some measuring utensils, whether they are measuring cups. These are dry ingredient measuring cups. These are liquid ingredient measuring cups. Liquid measuring cups have lines on them so that you can see the liquid through the measuring cup and know exactly how much you have. A dry ingredient measuring cup is the exact size that you are measuring, and that's why these come in sets of multiple sizes. And then of course there's measuring spoons, and measuring spoons are used to measure both dry and wet ingredients. We'll talk more about those when we get into the measuring lesson. If you're ever reading a recipe and you learn that you have to grate an ingredient, you would need something like this or something like this. This is a grater, and this is called a box grater because it looks kind of like a box. And on each side, it has different sizes of holes or slices that you would use to grate your ingredients. This one is called a microplane, and it has very, very small cutting surfaces. And you would use one like this for things like grating nutmeg, things that you want to be very, very fine. So I mentioned mixing bowls, and I have a few of them here. Mixing bowls are exactly what they sound like. They are bowls that are designed for mixing ingredients together. Most mixing bowls have sides that come up like this. Some bowls you'll see are very shallow and they are very spread out. And those aren't really very good mixing bowls because when you are mixing your ingredients, the very sloped sides can allow the ingredients to spill out. A mixing bowl usually has sides that come up almost completely vertical so that when you are mixing your ingredients, everything stays in the bowl. Now, there are many other utensils that you will see in typical kitchens, but we're not going to go over all of them today. As we come across ones that you might see in future lessons, we'll just talk about them when we see them. So the last thing we're going to talk about is knives. Every kitchen is going to have at least a few knives, and there's all different kinds of knives out there, but we're just going to talk about a few of the most common ones. These two knives look very similar. They look like a big and a little version of the same knife, but this knife right here, it's kind of triangular shaped and a little bit long. This is called a chef knife, and this is a knife that you would use mostly for preparing ingredients, whether it's dicing up potatoes, chopping lettuce for a salad, cutting meat into cubes for stew. This one, which looks like a smaller version of the chef knife, is called a paring knife. A paring knife is used for cutting small things into small pieces. You might use it for cutting the peel off of an apple or cutting apple pieces into little bits, and it is often used for similar things that you would use a chef knife for, but this is easier to get into smaller spaces with smaller things. These three knives that you can see right here are similar in that they are all serrated knives. A serrated knife is a knife that has a blade that has serrations on it, which are little metal teeth. And these are usually used to cut things that are either very difficult to cut or very delicate to cut. Both of these serrated knives are bread knives. This one is a very unusual knife. It has a blade almost like a saw, but it is also a serrated knife. This smaller serrated knife is a steak knife, and you would, of course, use this for cutting steak or meat or other things. This knife is sort of like a chef knife, except it has a very long and narrow blade. I have a couple of these as well in different sizes. You can see right there. I'm going to put these back in their cases very quickly because they are very sharp knives. These are called fillet or boning knives, and they are used for removing meat from bones or cutting meat into fillets. And a fillet is a very thin slice of meat. Now, of course, when you are using knives in your kitchen, you always want to be very safe, and we will talk about that a little bit later on. And when you are cutting up food, chopping food, dicing, and all of that, you would use a cutting board. A cutting board is going to protect your work surface and make it easy to clean up when you've been chopping up your ingredients. Oh, and I almost forgot, there is one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is this. This is a meat thermometer. Now, this one in particular is called an instant read meat thermometer. It has a very skinny little probe, and it has a little digital readout. And when you are making something like a roast beef and you want to know if the meat is done, you want to check the temperature. And so you would open up the oven, take out the roast, and you would stick this in, and it would immediately tell you what the temperature of the meat is inside, which is why it's called an instant read meat thermometer. I have another one that has a metal probe like this, but it's designed to stay inside the meat the entire time you are baking it. And the readout that tells you what the temperature is magnetic and actually sticks to the front of the oven so that you can check the temperature without ever having to open your oven. So these are all of the basic utensils that you might find in a kitchen, and there are more, but we won't go into all of them today. I didn't want this video to be too incredibly long. So as we go through the lessons and we come across other utensils, I will just share information about those as we come across them. So with this lesson, I do have a worksheet that you can print out. It is available on my website. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can find a link to it in the video description down below. So thanks for joining me for Home Ec with Constance. There will be new lessons every week on Monday throughout this series. So thanks for joining me here again in the Homestead Kitchen. My name is Constance at Cosmopolitan Cornbread, and I will talk to y'all next time.